Hey everybody, what's up? Stinger here again, and welcome to episode number 4 of my Devlog series on my Unnamed colony game. Now, if you take a look at this right now, you don't really see a big of a difference compared to last week, right? The only difference is that the buttons are arranged a little bit differently, and that's really the only difference that you see. And even if I just click on this, you can see the buildings are still looking exactly the same as they did before. And that is because in terms of features, this change right here in the buttons is really the only progress that I've done. However, that does not mean that I haven't made any progress at all, or that I have made little progress. Quite the contrary, actually. I've made quite a bit of progress on the game in the last week. However, all of that progress, or most of that progress, is in the background, because I've actually restructured the program twice. Because, as you know, I'm new to Unity, right? I do have quite a bit of experience in programming in general, but when it comes to Unity, I'm pretty new. So I'm still learning a lot of things, and I'm still probably using quite a bit of inefficient workflows and stuff like that. And in the last week, I learned quite a bit about two main systems, or two main workflows, if you will, in Unity, and I decided to implement them because they are way better than the stuff I had before. So the first thing that I changed was the way that the input is handled. Previously I've been using a polling system, which is kind of deprecated, kind of inefficient, and kind of buggy. You may remember the whole bug where you click into the world when you click on the UI button? Yeah, that's a result of a poorly implemented polling system, basically. What I did now is I switched to Unity's event system, which is more efficient, more modern, and less buggy. And you don't really see a difference like when you just look at it like this, but when you're actually using it, you will notice that it's less buggy. For one, there's a small bug that I never even told you about, and that was that you remember how the buildings are actually going below the ground halfway? The thing was, when you click down here, previously it would have selected the building because the raycast would just go through the terrain, it would just ignore the terrain and see, oh, you clicked on the building, even though, well, realistically you clicked on the ground, so nothing should happen, right? So this now doesn't happen anymore. You actually have to click on the above ground part of the building to actually select the building, which is nice. The other change is that the buttons now are actually working properly. So if I hover over this building and then click this button here, you can see it doesn't select the building, and if I now select a different button here, you can see it didn't build the building, right? That is because when you now click in the UI, you aren't clicking in the world anymore. This also means, by the way, that the delete button is now working, right? So if I select the building, delete it, it's working. Previously it didn't work because when you clicked on the button, you also clicked on the world, thereby deselecting the building, and then the button didn't have anything to delete anymore. So those are two bugs that have been fixed by that. A few other things that are just more efficient, less buggy, stuff like that. Generally great, and it definitely allows me to do some awesome things in the future. The second big change is that for the buildings, I switched from a prefab workflow to a scriptable object workflow. This means that instead of having a single prefab for every single building, I only have one generic building prefab, and I'm holding the data for the buildings in scriptable objects. For several reasons, this is less error prone and more efficient. I'm not going to get into technical details because this is not a programming tutorial, but in the future that will allow me to more easily add more buildings, to more easily work with these buildings, to more easily change the structure of buildings or what data buildings have, stuff like that. And it will allow me to more easily change UI around them and stuff like that, which is really, really great. The one visible change that I made was the change to the build buttons that you can see. This is not merely just me rearranging these or anything. This is actually the dynamic loading of the build buttons that I talked about the past 2 episodes or so. In any case, these are now actually created upon game start, depending on the list of buildings that are available, right? So basically, I now have a central list of buildings. Whenever I create a new building, I just pop it in there, and the UI manager will automatically load these in, and at the moment they're being stacked on top of each other like this, but this will change. I just didn't bother with the layout or anything like that at the moment. I just mostly bothered with the technical functionality of it. But this will of course change into a proper UI design, probably similar to what Final Coaster has, because I really like that. But again, that will change in the future. But yeah, this is something that will of course also make it very easy to add new buildings and stuff, because I don't always so have to manually add any buttons or anything like that, which is really nice. And at last, let's talk about the statistics. And this week they're actually quite interesting, and when you look at them you can actually see the rewrites that I've done, right? The restructurings that I've done. You can actually see them quite a bit, because the first thing that you'll notice is that the number of UI objects dropped from 5 to 1. That is simply because at the start of the game there are no build buttons, right? The only button that's left is the delete button. That's just so there as it always was, but the build buttons are now loaded when the game starts. It isn't there at the instant that the game starts, so they aren't counted, right? And as in fact, the number of the number of build buttons can always change depending on the number of buildings that are available to build, right? So the actual number of UI objects right at game start is 1. And you'll also notice that the number of prefabs dropped from 4 to 2. That's part of the change from the prefab workflow to the scriptable object workflow. Because instead of having the 4 building prefabs that we had before, we only have a single building prefab, and instead 4 scriptable objects, 1 for each building, which is, by the way, another setting, another data that I added to the whole dataset. So we only have a single building prefab left, right? The second prefab is the build button prefab, because of course to dynamically create the build buttons I need a prefab for that. So we are now at 2 prefabs. Then we have the scriptable objects, which of course raised from 0 to 4 because I haven't used them at all before, and now I am using them. We have 1 for every building, and yes. So yeah, that's basically all the interesting stuff that happened in this week. Next week we'll actually probably, I guess, see some more content, because now I have a proper structure in the system. And yeah, see you next week, or in any of the gaming videos that I upload. And thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and see you next time. Goodbye.